the big, beautiful bill that just passed in the House is also going after the judiciary, and not enough people are talking about it. This would effectively undo all the current wins against the administration and basically make all the injunctions against them unenforceable. I've talked about this before. They're going after the judicial branch. It is the one branch currently keeping the admin in check. This is incredibly important. This tiny little provision is buried on page 562 of the 1,118-page bill, one that most members of the House admittedly couldn't read in its entirety because they were changing it up to the very last second. Section 70302, restriction of funds. As you may know, most of the wins for the American people right now are happening in the courts. But that doesn't just happen magically. As I explained the other day, an entity has to sue the administration or the government if they believe that they have been harmed by a policy. And then the courts rule, and it often gets escalated to the Supreme Court, etc. But what the courts can do while things are being figured out is issue an injunction or a pause on whatever policy is believed to be harming people until it figures it out. Here's the thing. When an injunction or a temporary restraining order is issued, the plaintiff, that's the person who is suing, is often required to pay a fee, a security, or a bond. In case the defendant that is being injuncted against is being told that they have to stop what they're doing, actually wins the case so they can recoup some losses. However, in cases where the question is that of constitutionality, the bond or security is often just forfeited. Otherwise, what could happen is that only rich people could afford to sue the government and receive an injunction. Can the judge require like a $1 security or bond? Yes. However, if you look here, this would also be applied retroactively. So in all the cases where injunctions have been issued where no bond was required, which is just about all of them, they would no longer be able to enforce the injunction against the administration. Now, how can they do that in a budget bill? Well, great question. This is why it's so important for Congress to have the power of the purse, not the executive branch, assuming, of course, they wouldn't enable bad behavior. But at the very least, you can see how powerful this sort of control is. Because basically what they're saying is that the government can spend no money to enforce an injunction or temporary restraining order if the security or bond was not collected at the time of its issuance. So technically, they're being like, we're not being unconstitutional. What we're saying is that you're not allowed to spend any money on respecting the Constitution. If this were to be enacted, all the current injunctions against the administration would suddenly become unenforceable. Not that they're respecting them all now either, but this is part of that whole undermining the power of the judiciary, which is so important. It's literally part of what this whole country was founded on. Anyway, this whole thing still has to pass in the Senate. The Senate is making changes, so just letting you know, your senators may want to hear about this bit. Just saying.